Sean, mate, welcome back to the podcast. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It's good to see you again.
Mate, you were one of the few guests that was actually requested to come back on. I had a lot of people message me after the first episode we did, and a lot of people were very interested in what you had to say. So yeah, man, I know a lot of listeners are really going to enjoy this episode as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's been a while since. I know you've been working hard with the podcast. It's looking awesome, mate. Good for you.
thank you, man. Thank you. So, mate, I'm curious. What would you say are some of the common mistakes nice guys make with women?
Yeah, good question. So I use this phrase a lot. It was coined by Robert Glover. There's a whole book on it, by the way. So uh, no more Mr. Nice Guy. If anyone wants to know anything about nice guys, that's the book you want to read because we all have some of those tendencies. But if I had to put it down to like one thing, that there's definitely some nuances to it, but I think it's just a lack of boundaries. That would be like the source of it. It's like not being able to communicate what your needs are and not being able to set rules around a relationship because that's what boundaries are. It's the structure that we navigate within. And nice guys tend to uh, suppress their needs or suppress their emotions because they're just trying to keep the peace. They just want to keep everyone happy, which just comes from a fear of conflict. So I'd say that's the main source of the problem, but that can manifest in many different forms.
So does being a nice guy, does it mean to be kind, but at the same time have boundaries? But what would be the difference between a nice guy and someone that's kind?
Yeah, that's a good definition. So again, kind of referencing the book, it's like nice guys are anything but nice because a lot of what they do is like a form of manipulation and they often give to get. Um, but yeah, it's basically saying that nice guys aren't good men because good men are able to communicate healthy boundaries. They're able to express emotions in a healthy way. They're able to communicate. Um, Whereas a typical nice guy doesn't really do that. He'll use kind of covert contracts and um, just like subtle forms of manipulation in order to get his needs met. Kind of like I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine, which sounds good in theory, but doesn't work in intimate relationships.
Yeah. Yes. And what would you say are some of the common ways that women test men in the dating phase?
Yeah, wow, I could write a book on that. I think, well, firstly, I like to preface it. It's not necessarily intentional all the time or uh, even malicious. Like, I think it's just a natural part of the mating, dating process. And yeah, it can come in many different ways. But again, at the source of it, I think women want to know that you're made of the good stuff. You know, they want to see the traits um, that are required in order to potentially build a family. You know, are you going to be able to provide for them? Are you going to be able to protect them? Are you going to be able to create a container that's safe, where they're going to be able to essentially invest in their future with you? So yeah, I mean, like it can come in many different forms. It can come with acting out. I think it really comes down to testing boundaries. You know, it's like almost like a child misbehaving to see how far they can go. You know, and I don't think it's just specific to women or exclusive to women. I think men can do it as well. There's definitely a bit of like dynamic towards like from the females to men that we have to hold that sort of masculine pole, which really comes down to being able to create that structure and create that sort of safe container within the relationship.
So would you say that women test men subconsciously or consciously?
Both. I would say it's probably more subconscious, because no one wants to admit that they're testing someone, you know. Um, but I've certainly experienced it, and like I genuinely don't think it comes from a place of malice, And I think a lot of men take it personally when kind of a woman misbehaves, or like she might start teasing him, or she might start acting in ways that's going to trigger him a little bit. But basically, just to see how he handles stressful situations. And like, I think it's totally fair for a woman to do that. Like they need to know how you are in stressful situations. Do you just get angry? Do you get abusive? Because there's I think more to lose for a woman. Obviously, she can't physically keep herself safe, so she has to almost like have protocols in order to figure out how to keep herself safe. So it's subconscious, and it's just part of, it's part of the relationship dynamics that we have as humans. So a lot of it's subconscious, but I think a lot of men take it personally, and they act out and they get defensive, which is definitely not the way forward.
Yes, yeah. And texting, mate. So this is something that a lot of guys struggle with in the whole dating phase. Texting is one of those things. Should I reply too soon, or leave it a little bit? Should I wait for a couple of days? And there's all this talk about when is the best time to text. Is it later on at night when most people are on their phones? I mean, what would you say are some of the common mistakes guys make with texting?
Yeah, there's a few there. 20 years ago, we wouldn't be having this conversation, but now so many relationships are formed online that texting is just a huge part of communication and the dating process. So, yeah, one of the biggest things that guys do, or biggest mistakes that I sort of see them make, is really early on, if you've just started dating someone, is like taking it too seriously and just being boring. Women particularly, they run off emotions. Like emotions are currency. You want her to experience excitement, joy, all of the positive emotions attached with you. And if you're just bombarding her with like interview style questions, and your opening line is, "Hey, how are you?" it just doesn't create any excitement at all. It doesn't invoke any emotions. It's just boring. People become very indifferent. Women become very indifferent to men. That's definitely one. And then I think investing too much in online relationships. This is another thing that guys do. Usually when they don't have many options or they're a bit lonely, they get attention from someone online, and they'll spend weeks, sometimes even months, texting a woman. And in their head, they've created a relationship with this woman, when in fact they've not spent any time with her in the real world. And she'll probably be out there trying to find someone else, and this guy's completely caught up in this relationship, and he's like blocked off all his other options for her. So it's almost like creating an imaginary relationship and over investing in a pen pal, essentially. You should always just aim to meet women as early on as possible. Use texting as a way to meet women in person, secure a date, and if there is some chemistry and compatibility there, then you can maybe start investing a bit more time in communicating more openly.
Yes. And what about flirting, mate? Because that's a skill itself, and a lot of guys really do struggle with flirting, and it is an art, isn't it? It's a skill that you have to learn. But what would you say are some strategies for guys to help, employ flirting into the conversation? Like, how can you employ that?
Yeah. Again, it comes down to creating emotions, right? It's not like a traditional conversation. It's you're trying to play on emotions, and again, you want her to associate positive emotions with you. Um, I like guys get really stuck. We have like a lot of men have a big fear of rejection or fear of being unworthy, which causes a lot of approach anxiety, and it just creates a lot of nervous energy for men. I think a lot of women won't be able to experience that because men are, for the most part, responsible for the courting process and approaching, and we're leading the way. But I think it's about being playful and just having a good time. Like it's all about creating a fun experience. Um, Guys get very outcome focused, and they're like, can I get a number? Can I get her on a date? Am I going to kiss her? Can I get her into bed tonight? And it's like an objective, which kind of just brings you out the present moment, and it just sucks a lot of the fun out of the interaction, and it puts pressure on it. And women are super intuitive. Like they've been dealing with guys coming onto them their whole lives. So if they get even a slight sign that you're being pushy, creepy, or anything like that, or just even too intense, it's going to create pressure, and it's going to be a negative experience for the both of you. So just have fun, be playful, and just focus on connecting with the person in front of you, and like don't get carried away.
And what are some good dating ideas, mate? Like, so for a guy that's new to the whole dating scene and he's just asked a girl out, she's agreed. So, what would be some fun ideas to take a woman out on a date?
Yeah, good question. I get that asked a lot. For me personally, I think the first date should be as low investment as possible, both with money and time. Like,
Yes.
if you've never met this person before, the last thing you want to do is take them out to a fancy dinner where you're like kind of trapped for a few hours and there could be absolutely no vibe. And yeah, maybe you've had to drive a long way to go and see them. Like, keep it casual. So for me, mine's always either a walk on the beach, a coffee, or even a coffee and a walk on the beach. You could do something kind of active, where there's like a bit of stimulus around you. So there's more to talk about, there's more going on. It's a little bit more, just casual. So like going to play pool or going bowling, grabbing an ice cream. I always stick to those. But
Yeah.
like, I think what a lot of guys do is they put so much pressure on the first date. It's like, oh, do you want to go out for this fancy dinner? It's like, you just want her to say yes to meet you. If she meets you and there's a vibe, she's going to be interested to see you again or not. So you just want to make it as easy as possible for her to say yes, and just take the pressure off it. Try and have fun. The first date should all be about like just connecting with that person and having a good time.
And you're 100% right too, Sean. Women are just constantly bombarded and influxed with messages on Instagram and dating apps, but a lot of guys really struggle to even get a date. So how can guys, be that person that can be a little bit captivating and try and catch a woman's eye to even get a date? What should a guy do?
Yeah, another good question. The the most overused phrase is like, "Oh, just be yourself," which is kind of redundant advice. It doesn't help anyone, particularly if you're a man being yourself and it's not working.
Yes.
That's shitty advice. If it's working and you are being yourself, it's great advice. So it actually doesn't really help anyone. Um, but like, obviously, you want to be authentic. Like if you're really intelligent, then obviously you want to present that in the best way possible. Or if you're really funny, if you're really charismatic, if you're really good looking, or if you have something that's interesting about you that's going to separate you from other men, you want to express that, And I think that's something that a lot of guys struggle with is to actually express themselves. Kind of related to this like nice guy syndrome, where a lot of guys just shrink and they become kind of yes men, and they
Yes.
they pedestal women, and they'll be like, yeah, anything you want to do, just want to keep you happy, and they kind of just default to her, and it's not showing a sense of leadership, and it's not showing any initiative, which is kind of the opposite of expressing yourself. Like you're kind of constricting yourself, which that's not allowing anyone to get to know you, and you're never going to be able to connect with someone if you're operating from that place.
Yeah. And what about women, mate? What can women learn about dating? What do you think are some of the common mistakes women make when dating?
Mm. Yeah, that's a good one. I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that one. um, I think for both men and women, it's just being very clear about what it is that you're looking for.
Yes, couldn't agree
I,
more, mate.
yeah, and I think some people don't know, and that's also okay, you know. But it's just about being honest about what your intentions are. If you're just looking for something casual, don't hold any shame around that if you want to sleep around. If that's what you want to do, cool, own it. But don't like tell someone that you're looking for something serious, allow them to get emotionally invested, and then cut them off, which men and women do. But yeah, if you're looking for something serious, then maybe don't entertain as much casual dating. You know, just be clear on what your non-negotiables are from the get-go. This is something that I talk to both men and women about. It's you have things that are deal breakers. You know, like certain values. Do they want kids? Do they want to get married? Religion could come into that. Do they want to travel? If someone's not aligned with those core values, you're wasting your time. If that's something that you're looking for long term. But again, a lot of people just aren't very clear on what it is that they want. And then they're also not honest about it. So, yeah, I think be honest with yourself and then be honest with anyone that you come in.
Yes,
Because it just saves everyone a headache and some heartache.
100%. And would you say that dating nowadays is more difficult for men or more difficult for women?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be super biased. It's easy for me to say that it's harder for men because that's all I've experienced. Although I actually don't personally feel like it's hard for me. So again, probably not the best person to ask in terms of personal experience, but I don't really get caught up in like this debate of who has it worse. It's almost like the victim Olympics, you know, which I've seen that
Yes.
phrase recently, and I was like, I love that because we've just like formed this competition where it's like, oh, but so many men are just like invisible, and it's 10% of men that are getting all the women, and women only want tall guys who are really rich and like handsome and successful, and but then it's like, you know, women are like, oh, where are all the good guys at? And it's, you know, there's you can just complain. You can complain and moan and be negative about both sides of the argument, but it's not about who has it worse. I think it's just about having a little bit of compassion for both sexes. You know, the guys can understand the female experience a little bit more, and we can basically do better for them. And it's the same for women towards men. Like if women had a little bit of compassion for men and their problems, I think everyone would be a little bit better off, you know, um, rather than getting caught in this battle of like, oh, we have it worse, it sucks, you know, and it's just, it doesn't help anyone.
You said something on the last podcast, mate, that was very resonating. Men should show more respect and women should show more sympathy because I think the sexes are quite confused about what we want. And I think you sort of nailed it that I think open communication and being authentic and honest from the get go about what you want. And that really stuck with me, mate, when we last spoke. So, what would you say are some things that people can employ in their dating to one, I guess, have a little bit more confidence and reassurance? Because I think both sexes are confused right now. So, what do you think?
Yeah, big question. Like, yeah, as I said, being honest, you know, being clear on what it is that you even want, because I think some people are dating when they're not quite ready. You know, they've rushed into it after a breakup, or they're just like not quite emotionally available. Um, I think for everyone, it's just doing a little bit of inner work. You know, I think generally speaking, women are a bit more receptive to that. I don't know, it's the male ego where we kind of just feel like we can handle everything by ourselves. And, you know, there's the stigma that like men will do anything other than go to therapy. But I think just gaining a little bit of self awareness, you know, like understanding what your triggers are, how your trauma is affecting you and how it's affecting your relationships. If you can get a little bit of a background in yourself, you can just navigate the dating world a little bit better rather than what a lot of people do is carry around all this baggage that we're unaware of get triggered by people, and then project our insecurities and fears onto everyone else, and then they have to deal with it, and they get hurt, and then they continue to hurt someone because we've hurt them, and like it can just be a bit of a domino effect in that sense. So that's definitely one thing. It's just like doing a little bit of work, and yeah, as I said before, being clear on what you want, you know, because a lot of people don't have fucking clue what they want. I think, you know,
Yeah.
they might say they want one thing, but they're totally not available for that. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that'll help a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. And you said also like more and more people are meeting on dating apps,
Mm.
and it's becoming quite popular. You know, I think how I was brought up, I would meet a person either at a gym or church, or you meet it through a friend of a friend. But I think more and more people are meeting online now. But what would be some do's and don'ts when it comes to online dating?
Do's and don'ts for online dating. Um, don't overinvest. Yeah, again, like I think maybe more so guys than women. I'm not quite sure if women have that same problem where guys just get very one track minded, and if we're into one woman, a lot of the time, for the majority of men, they focus on no one else. Um, where I think like women are probably a bit more open to keeping their options open, and they'll always be looking for the best possible fit. Um, Not always, of course. Like I think there's obviously guys who do that, and there's girls who don't do that. But um, yeah, do's and don'ts of online dating. Just try and have fun. You know, be clear on what it is that you want. Try and have fun. Be honest. Try and be kind as well. It's like, you know, dating relationships bring up a lot of shit. I think more than anything, you know, it really does reflect back to the parts of yourselves that are like unhealed, and most of your fears and insecurities will come out when you're facing someone that you're like really interested in. So yeah, just like try and be a little bit compassionate as well. Like a lot of people ghost, and a lot of people uh, kind of lie and manipulate, and just yeah, I think like all of that is just like totally unnecessary. So that's a definite don't. Um, Online dating, dude, I've seen some terrible not platforms, profiles. Use up to date photos. Like, don't be a catfish. This is definitely probably more of a female thing than a men thing. Put good, clear, up to date photos for your first profile photo. Stop doing group photos. Stop doing photos where you're 50 meters away and you can hardly see your face. Um, Try and make yourself look somewhat interesting, you know? Um, if you've got a good photo of you with your friends, or a passion or a hobby that you've been into, try and like express that a little bit, you know? Because a lot of people, I've had to scroll through 5 or 6 photos and don't really know what they look like, and actually don't really know anything about them, you know? So for me, I'll put something about MMA in there, or health and fitness. I'll put usually a bit of a silly or funny photo of me with the guys just like goofing about. Um, yeah, so at least people have like a bit of an idea of what I'm really like, as much as possible. Um, yeah, yeah, I've seen some terrible profiles.
Yeah. A common question too, Sean, is women only want the 666. They want the 6 feet tall, the six-figure income, the six-pack abs, but that couldn't be further from the truth. I think this is kind of a misconception that most women are just after a guy that has a lot of money. And you made a video, I think, a while ago that's completely bullshit. What do you think women mostly want in a relationship from a guy?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think long term, women obviously want a guy who is at least financially stable. You know, I don't think anyone's debating that. You don't necessarily have to be rolling in it. I think. I think for the most part, a lot of women are kind of making their own money. Um, I think it's more about displaying the ability to build and earn and just build a future and earn money in the future. If you're ambitious and you're passionate about something,
Potential.
yeah, exactly. Like people are investing in your future. You don't have to be there now, but you need to have goals. You need to have ambition. You need to have work ethic. You need to be disciplined. You need to be, I mean, mentally stable. Like a lot of people just have like addiction problems, whether it's alcohol, drugs, porn. Like if you've got something that is really, really debilitating in your life, maybe focus on that before worrying about being, you know, having a six pack and making six figures per year. But just like do the best you can. A lot of the people that are moaning about, you know, women who only want a certain type of man, they're not even close to that anyway. They're not even doing the things that are like basic requirements to be like to put you in a position that we're not even going to consider you a partner. Like basic things like, are you working out? Do you actually have half a social life? Do you have a stable career? Do you have any sort of goals? If you're not doing those things anyway, why are you bitching and moaning about what it is that women want and like how it's unfair? So I think people just need to like focus on the basics before getting carried away with that argument, because yeah, it's easy to fall into that trap online, I think, because if you speak to real women in the real world, they care about your personality. Like, are you supportive? Are you fun to be around? Are you like ambitious? Those sorts of things, which aren't correlated to looks or money for the
Yeah.
most.
And you outlined a lot of green flags in men too, mate. And it's common sense. Yeah, I 100% agree with you that it's very basic. Look after yourself, your health. Uh, Work on your hobbies, ambition, things like that. These are common traits I think that women do find appealing. But what would you suggest for guys to help navigate their way through the dating market? What would be a good quality woman? What are some of the green flags guys should be looking at when it comes to dating?
uh, Green flags for women. So cut out a little with that. So you saying what would be green flags to look for in women?
Yeah, yeah. So what would be some green flags guys should look for when looking to date women? Obviously.
Okay, yeah. I mean, a big one, big one is taking accountability. Um, I think that's a big difference that at least I've experienced between men and women. Like men get called out much more honestly and brutally about like what it is that they are and aren't doing, and where they're not up to
That's
scratch.
so true. That's so true.
Yeah, whereas I think women can like kind of sugarcoat everything, and they just want to kind of make each other feel good. So I think sometimes when you call someone out on a particular type of behavior, can they honestly look at themselves and be like, you know what, that's fair. I'm sorry that I did that, and like I'll do my best not to do it again. I think being a victim, or this like victim mentality, like, oh, it was their fault, it was his fault, it's everyone's fault, and they're always just blaming everyone else rather than taking accountability. I think that attitude can absolutely ruin your life, because a lot of men will get involved with, and women, they'll get involved with the wrong person, and they'll get buried. That attitude will bury them, because it's like it's just you can't build a healthy, trusting relationship with someone who's just not willing to take responsibility or accountability. So I think that's a big one. Um, and then consistency. So a lot of people get mixed messages, or like they're kind of playing hot and cold. And like a mixed message is a very clear message. Don't get me wrong. I think some people, when it comes to texting, they can be pretty poor and they're just not good texters. That's fair enough. Um, but yeah, if someone's giving you loads of attention and then they're kind of like maybe neglecting you and just not really communicating openly, um, and they're just not being honest about what it is that they're looking for or where you stand with them, that's a huge sign of emotional unavailability. You're probably just seeing you as an option. Um, And if you're looking for something long term and something serious, you don't want to be someone's option. You want to be prioritized, and you want someone to be at least fully invested in what you have, you know,
Yeah.
before picking and choosing other people. At least that's what I believe, you know, because otherwise you're always going to be looking for the next best thing, and that's a dangerous game to play.
Yeah. Why do people tend to sabotage relationships even though there are a lot of green flags?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely experienced this on a personal level, and I've seen it a lot. Um, yeah, like having an unhealthy pattern and not even being aware of it is one thing. You know, it's like people repeat patterns and they're just completely stumbling around in the dark. That's one thing. But actually becoming aware of a pattern that you might have, and then trying to change it is really part of the work that I do. Um, yeah, there can be a lot of different reasons. Fear is a huge underlying part of that, like a fear of rejection, a fear of intimacy, a fear of commitment, a fear of being abandoned, um, and like a, a lot of it comes back to our nervous system. So, like I may have spoken about attachment styles before, and that's our survival mechanism. You know, and we learn that very early on in childhood. Most of it is that's what makes up how we operate in the dating process now, and then also experiences that you've had in serious relationships as well. So like later on in life, and everything that we've had is just like created this model of how we operate when it comes to relating to people. So we might have been cheated on a couple of times. So as soon as we are in a position with someone where we think, this could actually get quite serious, you know, the possibilities may be amazing and beautiful, and you could really have a chance at that relationship, but you shut down because you're just trying to defend yourself, because all your subconscious knows is, well, every time I open up to someone that they hurt me. So a lot of it's just like unhealed wounds, um, just being like very unaware of what our patterns and our tendencies are, um, which is why I said like people need to do some inner work. You know, and don't get me wrong, some people are much closer and they're much more secure, um, just by default. You know, they've probably had good relationships with their parents. Their parents had good relationships. They just had a better love map, I call it. You know, it's like that's how we learned love is expressed between people. So some people don't have as much work to do, and they generally have easier times forming relationships. And when they're in a relationship, they find it much easier to be vulnerable and to communicate and to like have independence and for closeness. But then there's people that have had much more traumatic experiences, whether they've been emotionally or physically abused. Maybe their parents broke up. Maybe they had an absent parent. Maybe their parents were super stressed with work, or there was substance abuse, or like all of these things are going to create some sort of scar. And yeah, we carry that. We always carry that into a relationship.
Did you hear about the soccer player, Sean? I think it was a Brazilian soccer player named Kaká, and his wife left him because he was too perfect. And this guy is incredibly successful, a handsome guy. They had children together, incredibly wealthy, and yet she left him. Did you hear about that?
I know who the player is, but I'd never heard that story. That's
Mhm.
pretty amazing.
Yeah, there was an article published. He was just too perfect. So I think they were married for a while, but then she decided to pack up and leave. And we're seeing this trend quite often as well. And it's interesting you were talking about attachment issues because I personally had this happen in my life. I was dating a girl at the time, and everything was going perfect. We were having fun dates and the chemistry and the intimacy and all that sort of stuff. And then, months went by, and then all of a sudden she just completely did a 180-degree and just said, I'm not feeling this. I'm just in a place where I'm feeling unsure about this. And it was this very kind of hot and cold kind of dance that she was doing. And then it sort of ended. And then maybe a week or so later, she reached out and said, I regret this. I regret that we broke it off. And, now I want to sort of see where things go. And you're right, it is. It's these internal wounds that sort of manifest in the dating phase. But what are your thoughts on that situation with this soccer player where his wife said he was too perfect? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to ask her. It's not unusual for people to sabotage healthy relationships. Like, that's not unusual at all. Um, yeah, I mean, we stick to what we know. Like, we love familiarity. That's like how our nervous system operates. It doesn't have the same consciousness that we do. It's like either safe or unsafe. It's trying to keep us alive. That's it. So it's either on or off. And how the nervous system operates is like, if we've experienced something and we have survived it, therefore it's safe. Even if it was a very damaging, toxic relationship, we'll often deem that as safe. Subconsciously, we're drawn to it. It's consciously, we're like, oh, that man or that woman's a dickhead. He treats me like shit. It's like terrible. Or the opposite. It's like, oh, this is a really good relationship. It's really healthy. He's perfect for me. He's really supportive. But your nervous system is like, that's unfamiliar and therefore it's unsafe. So you'll start sabotaging that relationship. And this is why people repeat patterns very often, because it's a survival mechanism, and it comes down to fear. And it's a human flaw, it really is a flaw.
Yeah, it's interesting, Sean. I had a forensic psychologist on my podcast a few weeks ago, and we were talking about why some women are attracted to serial killers and why women are attracted to dangerous men. And one of the things that she touched base on is it's because of possible childhood wounds. It brings up attachment issues or the idea of being able to change somebody. And it was just incredibly interesting in what she had to say. And I always found that very strange as to why some women are attracted to dickheads. Like, why would you want to be with a man that treats you like shit when you've got this guy over here that's treating you, he would go above and beyond for you? I don't understand. It didn't make sense. It's very strange.
Yeah, I mean, we've all heard it. It's like, well, why is he or she keep going back to that person? Everyone knows he or she's a dickhead and he's terrible for you. But yeah, like a lot of the time, if you've had an abusive parent who was like just emotionally unavailable, maybe not even abusive, just emotionally unavailable and like always kind of neglected you, that is how you have modeled love. That's the only map you have to operate out of. So that's all that naturally you're attracted, and your nervous system and your attachment is going to attach to that person because it's just reflecting back to you what you already know. Um, the good news is that you can work through that, and it's certainly not easy. Yeah, that's like part of doing the inner work or part of doing the healing. Um, and it's talk therapy is great. Like, as I said, if you're aware of it consciously, it's fantastic. These are subconscious mechanisms that are holding you back. It's your nervous system. Your nervous system is going to take the steering wheel. If it feels like it's trying to keep you alive, it doesn't matter what people say. If you feel unsafe, if your nervous system feels unsafe or you're activated, it doesn't matter. So you actually have to work with the body as well. So like things like meditation and breath work. Yeah, it's almost like retraining your nervous system. That's a big part of the healing process as well. And it's not easy. Hence why people take years often to overcome these unhealthy patterns, and they'll stay in unhealthy relationships for a very long time until one day they're like, you know what? I finally learned my lesson after 3 years of being abused. I've kind of figured it out now, and it's a slow process.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And also commitment issues can contribute to this as well too, Sean. And I mean, how can couples better navigate the crucial phase of building a strong foundation?
Yeah, that's another great question. Yeah, one that I'm still trying to figure out myself. Like I'm currently single and I haven't quite got there yet. Um, yeah, again, it's a big part of it's just doing the work. Both independently. It's like we all bring our insecurities, our fears, our attachment issues to the table, and in a relationship, our partner brings all that to the table as well. And it's almost like you're trying to make a puzzle with all these like kind of random broken pieces, and it's very difficult to understand what your pieces are and what those pieces are, and like what it really takes is like commitment, which is kind of part of what people are moving away from. You have to be fully invested, and like it's very easy just to be like, you know what, this isn't working out, I'm done. Most relationships are gonna fail. Like most relationships in history don't last because they're really, really hard. So you have to be one, I think, be very selective about who it is that you're looking for. Don't rush that. Be very clear on what things that you're not willing to negotiate on. Certain things that are like deal breakers for you, because a lot of the time it's just about picking the right person. So if you can do that, if you pick the right person, as it were, I don't believe in like there being just one person out there that we can build a future with. I think there's a huge demographic of people that are going to be more compatible than others. So I think that's a big part of it. It's just the selection process, and then just not bailing. Like it's not going to be easy. If you ask any married couple that have been together for decades, they'll be like, yeah, we've had some brutal times where like we thought we were going to break up. Maybe they did break up. It's just about being able to forgive someone and being able to be brutally honest with yourself about what it is that you want, being able to hold a little bit of space for what they want. And like, I love the quote, success can be found in the amount of uncomfortable conversations we're willing to have.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, I say it all the time, and it's so true because it's very easy to just neglect those conversations or just like sweep it under the rug when ultimately that just leads to resentment. It's like, well, I haven't communicated what it is that I really want or how I really feel. And then you're not allowing your partner to actually show up in the way that you need them to. And it's almost like a fear of, if you are being completely honest, or fear of being completely vulnerable, that they might just leave you and they might reject you, because that's a lot harder. It's a lot harder to actually be vulnerable and put yourself in a position where someone says no, and they do reject you or they do leave you. But what people defer to is like, let's just not talk about it because it's probably going to be a tough conversation. So have the hard conversations. I think
Yeah.
that's
Do you think also, too, mate, that society has indoctrinated people into thinking this is how love is? And I blame Disney and rom-com movies. This is how love is supposed to be, when it's not. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. And if you ask, as you said, you mentioned, if you ask people that have been married for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, it's hard work, it's teamwork, it takes grit. What do you think we're doing wrong?
yeah. I think we've been conditioned, not necessarily the right way. That's definitely a big influencing factor. Like we grew up with these fairy tale stories, these movies of like how romance is meant to look, and it's like often it's the knight in shining armor who rescues the damsel in distress. And this is a common thing I see. Like guys love to be the hero. They love to be the hero. So they pick a woman who's like a mess, and they think, oh, I can fix her if I just love her enough. Um, I can fix her, and then we'll be happy. And women do this as well.
Yeah.
And they love the challenge of, oh, I can fix it. And it's just acting out of a place of ego. And I think a big part of that is just like the human psyche, but a lot of that's just conditioning. It's like we've been told that that's the way to make it work, is to like fix the other person, but we can't really. I mean, you can definitely help people heal and you can support them through their challenges and their difficulties. But like really, you only can work through your own stuff and give people, permission to do the same. And then maybe
Yeah.
somewhere along the line it works. But yeah, not very simple in theory. I mean, simple in theory, not very simple in practice.
Yes. You mentioned too, mate, attachment issues, and we discussed this, I think, on the last podcast. And if I remember correctly, you have anxious attachment issue, you've got dismissive avoidant, and then there was secure attachment, and I think there was one more. Was that right, mate?
Yeah, yeah. So there's four main categories, but then within some of those categories, there's subcategories. The first one is secure. I think around 50% or so of the population is secure. So these are people who have like a pretty easy time with intimacy, commitment, and relationships. And then you have the umbrella of insecure, which is anxious, avoidant, and then disorganized. So disorganized is almost like the hardest one. I think, or the people that have disorganized attachment, they often have the hardest time developing relationships because they've picked up a lot of insecure attachments from everywhere, and they struggle. They just really, really struggle. Um, Anxious and avoidant are kind of opposing in some ways. Yeah, I mean, I'm not an attachment style expert by any means. That I know there's people out there that have like done 2-year degrees in attachment theory, but generally speaking, an anxious person is someone who's like always overthinking, is kind of like hyper vigilant, is always trying to people please, in a way to find security, but they're using other people to find security. It's like, well, if you're okay, then I'm okay, and it just makes them like really anxious. Whereas an avoidant is slightly more independent and just like has a difficult time with big emotions, and they'll kind of shut themselves off, and they can often have very rigid boundaries, and they're always trying to find a sense of independence. And these are the sort of people that you might be dating for 6 months. You've met each other's families, and then they're like, oh, well, like we're not in a relationship, because they have like a huge fear of commitment. So yeah, the anxious and avoidance, they actually tend to end up in relationships because they kind of fill each other's voids. Um, but yeah, like the idea is to understand what your tendencies are, like, because we're all kind of leaning one way. It's not like a box. It's not like you're labeled an anxious, you're labeled a secure or an avoidant. Each person has a slightly different tendency, and each relationship that we have will like naturally bring out slightly different sides to you. So if you're with someone who's super anxious, it's probably going to make you a little bit more avoidant because you're naturally going to want to pull away. And that's why we get these push-pull dynamics a lot. And vice versa as well. If you're with someone who's super avoidant and they never really like open up, or they're never really able to commit to you, that may make you a little bit more anxious. So if you can start understanding what your tendencies are, and you can like learn what your triggers are and basically become more secure. So the goal
Yeah.
is always secure.
Yeah.
That's my explanation.
Yeah. So what would be some signs, mate, to look out for if someone's emotionally unavailable?
I think not being honest about what their intentions are. That's a big one. If someone's emotionally available, they're gonna say like, yeah, I'm looking for a relationship, and I'm just like, I'm not in a rush, and I'm happy to hang out, and like, you know where you stand, and they're like, oh, I'm probably gonna date other people, or maybe they'll say, I'm just gonna date you. It's like they're being very open with where they stand and where you stand, um, and then yeah, like consistency. Some people think they want a relationship, and as soon as the going gets tough, or like there's any sort of real intimacy or commitment there, they completely pull back, and then they don't talk to you for a week, or they stop responding to messages, and they just are less available to meet you or have conversations. That's a sign that someone's not as available as they might have led on. You've probably heard of love bombing, which happens a lot, where people can overwhelm someone with positive affirmations and attention and love, and then they just completely pull back. That's a sign that that person isn't actually really available for a like a secure, healthy relationship, but they've kind of convinced themselves that they have. Um, so yeah.
Do you think also too, mate, that a possibility hookup culture has impacted the way men and women interact and date? Because now, you swipe right, I'm just looking for a one night stand kind of thing. And, generally a majority of people do want lasting relationships. Do you think hookup culture has impacted this?
Yeah, that's a difficult one because I don't know what hookup culture used to be like. I know dating apps have like had a massive impact on um, dating. Like people have more options now than they ever had, um, and it's like the shiny object syndrome where you're always looking for something better. And as I said, like all relationships are going to be hard. So at some point, you're going to have difficult conversations. You're going to have conflict, and it's not always just going to be like full of fun and joy and lust and excitement and great sex and like novelty. Like that fades after 3 to 6 months. But if you're if you really want a committed relationship, at some point you're going to have to choose someone that you have to deal with your shit, and you're going to have to some degree deal with their shit. But if you're always just looking for the positive emotions and the novelty and the fun and the excitement, you're always going to get pulled away from that. It's so easy to do. And I think social media and dating apps have made that far easier. Like, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago, I'm sure it was the only people you had access to were the people in your proximity, like in your town or your city. And now you have access to people all over the world.
Yeah,
If you do, you
yeah.
know, there's
You
more
know
to
what's
compare.
crazy? You know what's crazy too, Sean? I had Syed Chesbra on the podcast, and he's a very well known fitness influencer. He unfortunately tragically lost his brother back in 2011, but he's an iconic symbol of inspiration and hope for a lot of people. But he was saying, we were talking about the sexual marketplace. We are in a global sexual marketplace, and he knows a girl that actually slept with Chris Brown when he came to Australia, which is pretty insane. I mean, that never would have happened, 10, 15 years ago. It's crazy, mate.
Mm. Yeah, it's at the click of a button, you have like just tens of thousands of people, particularly for women. If like women want to, they can have sex pretty much whenever they want it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't. Again, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
Um, there was an interesting study that they did with people buying property, and no matter how valuable or good the property was, the people who had more options, they were always less satisfied with their decision because they had more things to compare their property to. So it's like, well, this property had a bigger garden. This property had better location. This property was better priced. This had a better neighborhood. So like the more options you have, the more you can compare, which like naturally just brings away some of the joy of what it is that you have, as opposed to being grateful and actually just focusing on what you have. And like I love the saying, the grass is greenest where you water it.
Yeah.
But we often kind of get caught in this trap of like, oh, the grass is always greener on the other side. I
Yeah.
wonder what their relationship's better, or that guy's better looking, or he seems funnier, or he seems, like it's very easy to get caught into that trap.
And this could be also what Kaka's ex-wife was thinking, because I find it incredibly strange. A woman would leave I think it was a 15-year marriage, and they had three children, married to an incredible, wealthy, successful man, and just decide to pack up and leave. I just find it so strange, very strange.
Yeah, I wonder like how much of what she said the reason was is the truth, like, oh, he was just too perfect. Like, I don't know if that's really what it is. Maybe she got bored. Maybe she has some attachment issues and she wanted a little bit more chaos. in her life, or just a bit more excitement. It happens, oh, maybe they just grew apart and she wasn't able to communicate that, but it's very difficult to say.
Yeah.
But it
There,
is,
there, yeah. There was a TikTok trend too, mate. I don't know if you were familiar with it, but there was the man versus bear debate, right? So women were getting asked, would you rather be stuck in the woods with a bear or a man? And women would say, I'd rather choose the bear over the man, blah, blah, blah. And then there was this other trend. Men were asked, would you rather tell your feelings to a woman or tell your feelings to a tree? And we've spoken about obviously the hard predicament that men are facing in the world right now, because society says to be vulnerable, to open up and express vulnerability. But at the same time, it's incredibly challenging. If you have a loving and supportive partner, it's very difficult for guys to juggle their emotions because society expects men to perform, but then at the same time, we understand that the suicide rate is a lot higher in men. So this is quite challenging, mate. But how can women, especially, create a safe space? More in particular, how can a man express themselves in a healthy way to their partner? What can both sexes do to help each other, especially if the man's going through some trouble? And how can the woman create a safe space, for the man to express themselves? That's the challenge.
that is the challenge. Yeah, it really is. So for men, I'll start with men. I think what men can do is actually just practice. And a lot of men just are completely disconnected to their emotions. They're overthinkers. They spend all their time in their head because they're not allowing themselves to feel whatever it is that's coming up. And that's worked for the best part. Um, yeah, evolutionary speaking, it's like we've had to go through some pretty brutal, harsh environments. It's like being really emotional about it all isn't going to necessarily help. That's kind of got us to where we are, but it's like at our own detriment now. And I think a lot of men, they're not even capable of opening up to other men. And I've done a lot of work in men's groups where every week a bunch of guys show up and it's just like a sharing circle. We talk about what's going well, what's not going well, and then we talk about challenges of life, things that we're like aspiring to. And just doing that and like hearing other men talk about their problems, and it's very structured. It's a safe container where it allows you to express yourself and express emotions that a lot of the time you may have been completely disconnected to. So I think as a man, if you can actually take a lot of the pressure off your relationship and you can find somewhere else to essentially get your needs met and have that support, um, it's going to train you to be able to express your emotions in a healthy way so that you may feel more comfortable doing that with a woman. So I think like practice and then support. It's like supporting yourself. Yeah, and then for women, honestly, is like trying not to take things personally. Um, yeah, it's like it's very easy if a guy brings up something that he's not happy with, and then like men do this too. Like if a woman brings up something that she's not happy with, or that she's feeling unfulfilled, or she's feeling unsupported or neglected, is to try not to take it personally, because that's the first thing that we want to do. If someone expresses something, it's like, oh, well, this means that I'm not good enough, and therefore we feel like we need to defend ourselves and justify why it is that we're not up to scratch, right? Obviously, how we communicate these things is very, very important. It's very different saying you're neglecting me rather than saying I feel neglected. So, yeah, like basic communication skills around that, I think, are really, really helpful for both people. Because a lot of things are misinterpreted, and when things do get heated, it's very, very easy for that to like spill over into something more drastic. Just like handling conflict, it's an essential skill for
Yeah.
relationships. Um,
And also, too, Sean, women only get one shot with a man's vulnerability. One, and if they throw it back in his face, he will never ever open up to you again. And this is the problem, not just for women, but also for men as well. But I always wondered when war veterans would come back after war and how women were able to help them through shell shock and trauma, because I'm sure these men must have broken down and seen some really horrific things. And if we look back at history on how men and women interacted back then, you know, is there more education needed, I guess, for men to openly express themselves in a healthy way, but I think also for women to be able to create a safe space, in particular for men to express themselves openly and healthy? Is there more education, do you think?
Yeah, I think there's definitely more education needed there. I think most people have never been taught. I certainly feel like it's a skill that I've learned or started learning in my late 20s, and I've still continued to like refine that process, because being vulnerable is hard. Like when you have big emotions and big insecurities, it's really difficult to accept them. It's even difficult to accept them as part of yourself, you know, and then having to communicate that with a partner as well. There's a whole new layer of like intimacy there, and all those insecurities and fears that come up: fear of not being good enough, fear of getting rejected, a fear of being abandoned. That all comes up, and yeah, I think what both parties can do, what I've experienced from my ex-partner, she was amazing at it. She would thank me for sharing things. She'd be like, thank you for sharing. And I personally had a very complicated relationship with crying. I went years without crying at all, and then just realized that I'd suppressed a bunch of emotions from a traumatic childhood. And then when I started tapping into that, I was like, oh, there's a lot of shit here,
And how good do you feel, mate, after a good cry? Hey, you feel great afterwards.
Exactly. Yeah, it feels great, I mean, it's a little bit overwhelming if you've not really like done that much, but yeah, like it's part of the healing process, so you release natural antidepressants when you do that. And my partner was like, it's sexy when you cry. She's like, because I can see what it is that's really going on
That's a
in
good
your mind.
woman.
Yeah, yeah, she was super supportive, and I think um, maybe not just encouraging men to cry. I'm not saying that's necessarily the answer, but just like thanking them for being vulnerable and not taking it personally. To be like, thank you for sharing, because that may be the first time that a guy's opened up about his emotions in years. He's going to be extremely sensitive to the response, and you have to give him some sort of positive reinforcement that that's okay. So yeah, I think that's super super valuable for a lot of women. And fortunately, I've experienced that a lot from friends, female friends and partners in the past, where they've allowed me honestly to heal through a lot of my shit. But it's the same both ways. Don't take it personally.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, mate. And I think one of the greatest compliments you can give a woman is vulnerability, because she sees that sensitive side to you. And I think too, yeah, it is a skill to be able to articulate it in a way that's healthy and not overly emotional and erratic. And I think if a woman accepts vulnerability, I think that's incredibly relieving. I can think of one relationship actually where I cried in front of my partner, and yeah, she loved me more for it. And I think expressing it in a healthy way, that's the hardest part too, mate. I think, and you definitely, I think, nailed that one.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, how you express these things, I think it's worth me saying. Don't make somebody else responsible for your emotions, and don't expect someone else to fix your emotions. Because I think guys can oscillate between the two. It's like, my emotions are my emotions, and no one needs to help me, and I have this lone wolf, sigma, alpha male mentality. But then when they actually start accessing what it is that's really there, and they start becoming connected to their emotions, it spills over, and it's like, oh, you have to fix me. Like that can happen. And so I think like how you express that um, is super important, and just being honest with like, this is how I'm feeling. You know, I'm feeling really angry, hurt, ashamed, sad, whatever it is, and I just wanted to like let you in on that because you're not
Yeah.
you're sharing without saying, here you go, deal with it. Like you're not just dumping on them, you know.
Not emotional dumping.
Yeah, because that can often make people feel pretty heavy and responsible, and it can, that's going to create a negative experience for the both of you.
Yeah. And I mean, if Top G can have a bit of a cry, Andrew Tate can have a little bit of a cry. I heard him on Piers Morgan. He said he actually shed a tear while he was in jail. And he's a masculine dude. He's an alpha. You know, he's a hardworking individual, and obviously he's had a huge impact, I guess, in the world. Some positive and some negative. But yeah, I think there's a time and a place to show vulnerability, isn't there, mate?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I don't think Andrew Tate's the best example of like masculinity, but it's a good example in terms of that warrior archetype. Like hyper masculine fighter, super successful. Obviously, says a lot of misogynistic things towards women, but like even he has expressed like, oh yeah, I like shed a tear. It's like we're human beings. Being like a human being means that you have emotions. Full stop. If you don't have emotions, means you're a psychopath. Like, which is ideal. So I think you just have to recognize that and yeah, just tap into it.
Yeah. So mate, how can effective communication help filter out the wrong people in dating?
Yeah. Again, in theory, this sounds pretty straightforward, but a lot of people have resistance towards doing it. Being clear on what it is that you want, and just being honest about it. It's like you might be on the first or second date, and I don't know, if you're like in your early 20s, probably going to be looking for different things to someone who's in their late 30s. It's like, hey, I don't really have much time to waste. I'm looking for something serious. I want to have kids in the next 2 years. I want to get married. Um, I want to travel. I am the sort of person who doesn't really go out too much. Like all of these things need to be very clear from the get go. You know. Um, yeah. Will you repeat the question now? I've gone off on a tangent.
Yeah, mate. Yeah. So how can effective communication help filter out the wrong people in dating?
Yeah. Again, it's just about being honest and authentic. I always come back to that. Uh, Setting clear boundaries. A lot of guys, the nice guy kind of syndrome. You have to protect yourself, and you have to just be able to say like, I'm okay with this, and I'm not okay with that. And you're giving people the opportunity to show you who they are and how much they care, and how committed they are to you. It's like having a basic standard. This is where the bar is. If you do anything below this, then like we're not going to work. Having a little bit of self-respect, um, but I think understanding what your negotiables are, and like understanding what your needs are, understanding some of what your triggers might be. Because you might be super attracted to someone, and on paper they could be great for you, but you could just trigger the fuck out of each other, and it's
Yeah,
like,
that's true. Yeah.
compatibility is not quite there. So, um, but that only really comes from like self awareness, because like people use the word, "Oh, you need to be a good communicator," but it's like, well, what does that actually mean? How can you communicate something if you're not sure of what it is that you're trying to communicate, or what it is that you need? So, again,
Yeah.
comes back to doing the work and gaining that self awareness.
So, mate, you're a successful dating and relationships coach, and you work a lot with men. But do you also work with women as well, mate?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, generally speaking, it's mostly men. It's a different feel. It's a different experience for sure. Um, I think women are much more in touch with their emotions. Um, so a lot of the time it's like, how are you feeling to a woman? And then she can just give you this entire storybook of how she's feeling. So a lot of the time, from my experience, it's like, all right, so how do we direct that and move that towards something? Like we have to kind of direct it, you know. Whereas men, a lot of the time, it's like the progress can be stubborn. Like men can be more stubborn. Like, I don't know how it is that I'm feeling, or I don't know what it is that I want, or they're like not willing to really like tap into it. But when they do, they have big breakthroughs. You know, like they'll have a light bulb moment. They're like, "Oh shit, I never realized that," and they can move from A to B very, very quickly. So I think it definitely requires a slightly different touch. That's just my experience, but yeah, I mean, a lot of what I teach is deeper mindset work. You know, things like understanding what your limiting beliefs are, understanding what your emotional needs are, your attachment tendencies, what your shadow might be, what your insecurities and fears are. They're not gender specific. There's a lot of what I do that's like probably more strategy, you know, like how are you meeting women? How are you talking to women? Like those sorts of things. That's actually only a real small piece to the puzzle. And a lot of that's useless. A lot of the strategy is useless if you're not doing the deeper mindset work anyway, because there's always going to be a block there. So,
Yeah. And we touched on the Me Too movement the last podcast too, mate. And this is the problem right now is guys are afraid to actually cold approach and go up and talk to women. They're really scared. I read an interesting stat, mate. I think 86% of women say that they want the man to make the first move, and 50% of men are afraid of making a move on a woman because they don't want to be seen as creepy. So, what would be some strategies guys can employ if they do decide to go and talk to a woman? Because sometimes too, mate, I think women might have subtle cues that guys don't pick up on, whether or not it's acceptable to go over and talk to them. Like I remember hearing about, I think Matthew Hussey was talking about in the olden days, women would drop a handkerchief and that would be the signal for a guy to go pick up the handkerchief and give it to the woman and then initiate a conversation. But we're living in modern times now, mate. But see, guys are scared shitless because they don't want to be another Johnny Depp Amber Heard case. So what would be some strategies for guys to go and talk to a woman but without seeming creepy?
yeah, maybe we need to bring back the handkerchief.
Maybe, mate.
I never knew that. Dude, that would clear up a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Although maybe a woman drops a handkerchief and then the wrong guy picks it up and starts talking to her.
True.
That would have some problems as well. Um, yeah, dude, it's a lot of it's just about having like a basic social awareness, you know, picking up on people's body language. Some of the guys I work with are like very process, systematic focused. Like they'll work in ITs their whole life. They may have had a long-term girlfriend, and they've never really been single for very long, and they've just never really had to develop those social skills as much. But it is a skill and it's practice. You know, I like for everyone. I think just like exposing yourself to a variety of people. You know, if you're living the sort of lifestyle where you're having a lot of conversations and you're socializing a lot organically, you're just going to pick up on people's vibe better. Like that, and that doesn't have to have the pressure of a male to female dynamic. I want to ask her out. So like one of the things I get guys doing, I'm like, just start having conversations with strangers. Like when was the last time you approached a stranger and you were like, hey, what's up? What's your name? And there's a layer to it. And then it's like, all right, give them a compliment. Go and start a conversation with a stranger. Talk to them for long enough. Give them an authentic compliment and then leave. You don't want anything from them. It could be an old lady. It could be an old man. Like you don't have to be attracted to them. But if you go through that process, you're learning the skills necessary and going through that process in order to develop the skills necessary to then maybe start flirting with someone. It's a slightly different dynamic, but the basics are the same. It's like, you know, be respectful, obviously. You know, if like a lot of people say like, I never want to approach a woman in a gym. I worked in a gym for many years and I actually found it very easy to approach women in gyms. If she's in the middle of a set and she's working her ass off, don't go and interrupt her. Maybe wait for her to go to the water fountain, you know? Is she got her headphones on full blast and a hoodie up? She probably doesn't really talk to her. You know what I mean? Or if she's
Yeah.
walking around smiling and she's socializing with other people, she's probably there to have a bit of a chit chat and a socialize as well. Um, yeah, so I think it's just about choosing your moment and like just just like be playful, be kind, and be considerate. You know, if someone says no, like if someone's obviously not receptive to the fact that you've just said hello to them, just leave them alone. Just like have a great day, see you later. Don't push
Yeah.
them because that's what's creating a lot of the problems for women.
Yeah. And what about women too, mate? How can women make it a little bit easier for guys to approach them? Because women still want guys to do the approaching. They don't want to have to go and do the approaching. And this is the problem that's happening right now. If the guy doesn't go over and approach, nothing's going to happen. But is there a way that women can be a little bit more inviting for a guy to go over and approach? What would be some suggestions on the women's part?
Yeah, there's absolutely no reason why you can't start a conversation with a guy. I know women want a man to make the first move, but like some guys are just super introverted and shy, and he might really, really like you. And the only reason that he hasn't spoke to you is because he's shy. So there's nothing stopping you from being like, hey, how's it going? You know, just like you can make the first move. There's nothing stopping that from happening. You know, I mean, like I'm from the UK, you're from Australia, and particularly in America as well, like Western cultures, I think um, women are probably a bit more reserved, generally speaking, particularly in the UK and like maybe Australia. I found American women a bit more receptive, and they're probably a bit um, more open to initiating conversations. But in uh, like Southern America, like Latino cultures, I feel like women will like totally chat me up, and it's great. You know what? It feels absolutely amazing for a woman to be like choosing you. We want to feel admired and chosen as well. Like we
I
fucking
agree,
love,
mate. I
you
agree.
know.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. 100%.
Yeah, I think most men are starved of like affirmations and compliments.
100%.
Yeah, I think like statistically, women to women get the most, then men to women, then men to men, then women to men. So like men receive the least amount of compliments. So just saying like, hey, thought you were cute. A guy will just think about that for the rest of his life. You know, like
Yeah. And you know what too, mate? I think a lot of men really are starving for appreciation. And I heard someone say this. They said the only time a man will receive flowers is at his funeral. And I think to myself, yeah, that's kind of sad. And I think it's, I remember very well that I had an ex of mine, and she went all out on Valentine's Day. It was the first time ever I had ever had somebody buy me gifts on Valentine's Day, decorate, the house and put petals and shit all over the place. Like I had never received that in my life, and it really just stuck with me. And yeah, I think you're right, mate. I think men really are starving for appreciation, and I'm sure there would be many times men could remember a compliment that they had from a woman like 10 years ago. Hey,
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, if you feel like you have something nice to say to a guy, say it. And go one step further. Actually, try and think of things that you appreciate in what men do. Because I know a lot of guys are starved of that. That's definitely something that women can step up with. I think in the same way that a lot of men can step up and maybe be a bit more respectful and just going above and beyond to make women feel safe. Um, I think that's definitely something men can do. But yeah, at the same time, like if the woman can just appreciate even the little things, like if he holds the door open for you, thank you, you're such a gentleman.
yeah,
That's gonna make your fucking day, and it's the most basic thing in the world.
yeah, yeah.
A lot of
It's
these
that
things go
quote, mate.
unnoticed.
Yeah, it's that quote, mate. Give a man a purpose and the ability to achieve it, and he will crawl over broken glass with a smile. It's so true, mate. I think if you really show appreciation and gratitude towards everything a man does, what does he want to do? He wants to do more for you.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think that's like something that people in relationships often get wrong, or at least from what I've seen. Um, yeah, like women will nag, or men can nag, but it's like coming from a place of criticism. You never do this, you never do that. And like it's like it's going to make someone shut down. Whereas if you just give them positive reinforcement, and again, it comes down to how you're communicating things and then like the language that you're using. Oh, like I love it when you clean up around the house, or I love it when you text me when you're at work. Like that's positive reinforcement. That's gonna be way more likely to create the outcome that you want. You know. So I think that's worth saying.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, mate. And mate, you're training for a fight, which is pretty exciting. And you said also this is your first fight, mate, for MMA. But how's the preparation going?
Prep's going good. I've had one MMA fight at
Oh, you've
Amateur.
had an MMA fight.
Yeah, it was probably 2 years ago now. Ended in a no contest. This one's a four-man tournament, so hopefully two fights in one night if I win. Got another 5 weeks to go. Feeling good. Yeah, like I'm here in Bali. The weather's good, the food's good, the training's good. So
And you're
yeah,
looking lean, mate. You're looking lean, shredded.
thanks, man. Yeah, I'm trying to keep a bit of the weight on, to be honest. So I need to make sure I'm getting the right foods in. But yeah, I appreciate that, mate.
That's great, mate. And when are you coming down to Australia? When are you coming over?
Dude, I keep saying I've not been away for a while, but soon. And
Yeah,
yeah, you'll be the first stop for sure.
100%, mate. We'll go get a pub feed and have a bit of a workout. Go down to the Goldie, have a bit of a swim in the ocean.
Absolutely. Yeah, you kick my ass at jiu-jitsu, show me the stuff.
We'll have some jiu-jitsu sessions too, mate. No, it'll be fun. Yeah, Sean, mate. Where can people find you? You're on TikTok and Instagram and the socials.
Yeah, yeah. Most active on TikTok. So my handle is Awakened Attraction, or you can just put my name, Sean Reed Coaching. And yeah, I've got a little podcast on my link tree there, and emails as well. So if you want to learn for free, you can jump on there, and always open to questions from both men and women. So yeah, feel
And and what can people do, mate, if they want to book in some coaching with you? If they want to, get some one-on-ones, what do they need to do?
yeah, I'd be happy to jump on a call. So just shoot me a message. There's a little application form just to see if you're kind of going to be the right fit. I get a lot of 16-year-old students who are reaching out and they're just not going to be in the right position in life to be available for coaching. So yeah, there's a few application questions, and then yeah, we'll jump on a call, see if we're going to be a good fit, and we can go from there.
Fantastic, mate. Always a pleasure to chat to you, and I'm sure a lot of listeners are going to get a lot of value out of this conversation. But thanks again, mate, for jumping on, and yeah, I'll chat to you soon.
I appreciate it, mate. Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, mate. Bye.
See you, Jack.